State your name and age.
Nolan Martin, 18.
Emily Ho, age 18.
I'm Anthony Valdez, I'm 19 years old.
Dimon Scarnia, and I'm 19 years old.
My name's Grayson Pham, I'm 19 years old.
To me, oppression is any type of inequality between groups. It can be from religion, race, ethnicity.
I guess as having somebody's rights taken away, like, without their consent.
I'd define oppression as limiting a group of people just because of a certain value that they have.
Unjust, unfair treatment towards certain groups or people.
I feel like oppression is when a minority has its power and its voice suppressed by a majority.
Most oppressed in America, definitely African Americans, women, and then I'd say Latinos.
Latinos, especially because of all the political issues going on right now. Same goes for Muslims. And then the third one, I would say African Americans also, for the same political reasons.
I think the three people in the US would be African Americans, Hispanics, and gay or LGBT.
Blacks, Asians, gays.
The African American community still is oppressed, even though we've put some time in to reduce the oppression. I feel that the LGBTQ society is judged more than oppressed. I feel like we have our assumptions against them, which are not very positive necessarily. And then surprisingly, I actually feel that the female community, I feel that we've pushed our ways to create equality, but I still feel like there is an inequality within the male society and the female society.
I believe it is prevalent, but we just don't notice because it's so common everywhere, especially in the workforce.
I'd say pretty prevalent, probably not as much as those three, but it's definitely a big one that goes unnoticed.
I'm not really sure what ageism is, but based on what I know of the topic, I'd say that there's some limiting of groups based on age, and I'd say that you can qualify some laws as ageism.
Maybe in a certain category, but I think that if a 16-year-old were to carry themselves as a older person, then maybe that they would be treated just as equally as whatever age they're trying to portray or something.
I feel like ageism is prevalent along the lines of forming stereotypes. I feel like the way that ageism is predominant in society is that younger people follow the stereotypes that they're immature and that they don't have the maturity that an older person has, and the wisdom and the common sense of decision making that adults have.
I believe that elders, because the older you get, the less likely people would want to hire you for a job, for example.
I'd say the group that's affected more by ageism would be the youth, because they don't really have a voice anymore, and kind of what they say doesn't really matter, and they have most of their rights taken away, but adults the elder get taken advantage of too.
I'd say elders, because a lot of the youth are still kind of in the media spotlight and stuff like that. Whereas old people, they're kind of just forgotten, in my opinion, from mainstream society. Nobody really thinks of old people.
Wait, actually, I feel like young people are affected more just because of the laws, because we are restricted to time when we're an adult and everything like that, and there's certain ages that we can be able to do things.
I feel like this kind of go back to the stereotyping. I feel like the youth.
I'd say that the youth have been oppressed just by the fact that they don't really have a voice and they can't vote. And one of the things is that youth to adult males, when they turn 18, are required to register to vote, but or not registered to vote, registered to sign up for the draft. and like they basically have to like vow their dedication to the country or to war, like if it ever happened, but like they're not able to buy alcohol or other things, and I think that can qualify as ageism.
Going back to the workforce, I feel younger people are treated as less qualified, and sometimes they are, but if they have the same qualifications as an older person, they're usually less likely to be picked for the job.
Probably like in their jobs, like not being taken seriously by employers because like they're a little younger than maybe like the average age of employees.
Just kind of go back to the stereotyping. I feel like the youth is oppressed in the way that people judge them because of their age, and they immediately think that young people are immature and don't have the capabilities to make moral, mature decisions. And so I feel like their abilities to partake in regular social activities are hindered because of that stereotype.
Probably.
Myself haven't experienced any ageism. I guess people kind of like talk down on you if you're younger, and I'd say that like they don't treat you the same if you're younger, but not really personally.
I haven't experienced anything like that though.
I'd say it's kind of hard to say, but personally I think so. For an example, I used to work in an Italian bistro, and the owner often didn't let me do like simple tasks such as like closing down the restaurant or setting up, just because like he didn't really trust me, even though I've been working there for like 2 years.
Yes, I personally am a business owner. I run a film business and I make videos for clients, and I feel like a lot of people, especially older people, don't take me seriously because of my age.
I personally could not recall an instance, but I could see how it could impact like somebody's way they look at each other. It probably has a greater effect in like applying for jobs and stuff. Like in competition, when people are looking at, they're probably gonna take someone older and maybe white than someone younger and a person of color.
Yeah, I'm sure it has. I can't think of like a specific example, but I can definitely see how those two forms of oppression could like amplify each other and like make it worse.
Fortunately, I haven't experienced anything like that. At least I haven't been aware of anything like that.
Yeah, I definitely think I have formed prejudices against younger people of color for like not knowing things that older people would.
I feel like there is some bias towards older people. Of course, like there's the bias that old people drive slow or just sort of stuff like general like categorizations of people, but I guess that kind of goes for all groups of people. So I guess like minorly, yeah.
Yeah, I've noticed, like, I have like a subconscious thought where I see like an old person driving slow, for example, and I think, oh, like they probably shouldn't be on the road. Sometimes I think things like that.
I probably look differently at people who are younger than me sometimes, just because I might feel like I know more about a certain subject than they don't. But there are times, obviously, younger people could be more experienced in something I am.
I do. I find myself, I'll admit it, but not necessarily in a negative way. Most of the time, it's to help me decide how I'm going to interact with said individual, whether it's a young person, if it's someone who's younger. I definitely don't use as big of words necessarily. I don't structure my sentences the same way. Whereas if I was with an older person, I change the way I talk. I talk a little more formal. I use those prejudgments as a way for me to interact with them. So not necessarily in a bad way, but I do.
I think it's because we're typically like, we usually see people in like their 30s, 40s, in the mainstream as like having jobs, being like well-rounded, and like knowing what they're doing, what they're doing. Whereas like younger people are kind of seen as not knowing as much as those older types of people. And I think we could be a little less prejudiced by putting ourselves in their shoes, since like not all young people have the access to information that older people do, or like the wisdom that older people do.
I'd say that like prejudices just come the fact that different people act different ways, and with people acting different ways, there forms a group of people acting that way, and a prejudice can just like be like, oh, all of this one group of people act the same. So one way to counteract that would be to just try to not categorize all people as one, but like as an individual selves.
I think it's just about not assuming things and just letting them portray themselves as they want to. And if you happen to think that they're older or like more wise than like on something than you are, just because you're not going to judge them just because like they're younger than you if they do seem to have knowledge on something that you don't.
I think we form them based on the extreme experiences we see, because I know I've noticed a lot of old and young people acting normal, for lack of a better word, but then I only remember the extremes, like an old, really young or really old person doing something memorable. I think that's how prejudices form.
I think it all kind of follows the idea of the stereotypes that I mentioned, and I feel like it's part of society for us to make stereotypes just because as we see things happen over and over, we naturally assume that that's the way that things happen. As far as stopping it, I think we have to go into interactions with those people with a more of an open mind.